Oh, thank you, Ron. Well, hello and welcome everyone to our session on how to achieve and automate PCI DSS compliance in the cloud. And for those that aren't really sure what PCI DSS is, it just stands for Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. I know we were having a few bandwidth issues earlier, so I'm just going to go ahead and turn off my webcam, but I'm a real person. You can see me. I'll turn it off. And yeah, let's get the show on the road. All right, so for our agenda today, we're going to cover who is responsible for compliance in the cloud, in addition to uncovering the specific controls you need to implement to achieve PCI compliance. Then we're going to move on to exploring common questions around implementing PCI compliance. And at the end, we're going to wrap it all up with how to automate compliance in the cloud using cloud native tools, or if you want to, you could bring your own third-party tools. And next slide. So a little bit about me. I'm a certified multi-cloud solutions architect here at Logicworks with about 12 years of IT experience. I was born and raised in Jamaica, and I'm actually learning how to fly a Cessna 172. Now, Logicworks is an AWS Premier Partner, Azure Expert MSP, and a leader in migration and managed services for highly regulated industries. We oversee over 500 trillion financial transactions actually are managed on our cloud reliability platform, which is very, very impressive. By leveraging a software-driven approach to cloud management, Logicworks, I would like to think of ourselves as a force multiplier for your business by allowing you to automate security and governance for those compliant infrastructures. So what I'd like to talk to you today about is one of our customers, Numerics. And Numerics is one of the fastest growing fintech companies in America, with over 20 offices, 700 clients, and around 90 partners across 26 countries. Now, as Numerics look to, migrate to the cloud, they faced many challenges, not just the migration itself, but also how do you achieve compliance in the cloud during the migration process. So as we kind of, go through some of the slides here, there will be a few different reference architectures I will bring up. Feel free to take a screenshot of it if you'd like, but I believe Ron also is going to share the video at the end. All right, so here's a big question. Who's responsible for compliance in the cloud? So let's unpack that question a bit, and we're going to look at some of the compliance frameworks that are currently used within the cloud. Now, the compliance requirements that you need to meet can vary, depending on the services and or products really that you provide to your customers, as well as the type of data that is stored. So if you're thinking credit card information or health information, that would kind of tune into where or which compliance requirements you need to meet. Now, common compliance requirements that I see are SOC 2, ISO 27001, all the way up to, of course, those more regulated requirements like HIPAA, which is your Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. So a common misconception I hear when I speak to my customers is the assumption that applications built or migrated to the cloud are implicitly compliant. Unfortunately, that's just not true. You'll still need to attain your own accreditation and your own certifications and certify your applications by engaging external auditors. Now, remember, there's a shared responsibility model for the cloud service provider and the customer. You, as a customer, are responsible for safeguarding that data stored within the cloud. So let's go through a quick little knowledge test between cloud provider responsibility and the customer responsibility. So first one, getting an attestation of compliance for your organization in meeting, compliance. That would be the customer's responsibility. What about hardening your operating systems to align with those compliance controls? So when you think about hardening operating systems, think about things like antivirus or locking down admin privileges and maybe locking down a few different ports on the operating system. All of those tasks, those would be the responsibility of the customer. Next up, we have, well, generating policy documentation for your cybersecurity policies. Uh, that would be the customer responsibility as well. And how about this one? Maintaining a PCI report for a public cloud data center and control the implementations that are needed for that compliance. That would be the responsibility of the cloud provider. Let's go through the last one here. Regularly reviewing access controls and permissions, which I find a lot of customers don't do. The initial setup is always perfect, of course, building a brand new greenfield deployment, but going back and reviewing those access controls, making sure that we're not giving excessive permissions to users, that is a task for the customer as well. So let's discuss the path to compliance maturity in the cloud. A fairly common path here, and you probably see a common theme throughout the entire of the Angel Beat webinar. First, we want to, well, define what controls we need to implement in the cloud to meet our compliance requirements. Once we have that defined, then we need to identify how best to implement these controls using either cloud native or third-party solutions. And once implemented, of course, we have to document the process and the controls. And we also need to ensure that the controls that we spent so much time defining and implementing are enforced. And lastly, we seek out ways to evolve and improve the process of implementing compliance. All right, so we'll start with phase one, define. A common driver of compliance requirements are your customers that consume your products or services. In other cases, when I'm working with my clients, they would like to take a proactive approach to security. They want best practices and seek to implement best practices to safeguard customers' data and mitigate vulnerability. And of course, if you do have regulated data where a company must comply and prove they meet the required security controls for a given environment, that's where things get a little bit more stringent, and there's not a lot of flexibility in terms of what controls you need to meet. If it's regulated data, for example, HIPAA, you have to meet these controls. Otherwise, there could be consequences in terms of a high fine. So let's take a look at PCI at a high level. Some of these requirements are fairly easy to meet. So if we take requirement 5 at the very top there for antivirus, you can choose your security tooling of choice. But as long as the requirement is met, we're going to get a little checkbox for that. Some of the other requirements, for example, restricting outbound traffic and regularly patching of your operating systems can present a significant challenge, especially if your applications are distributed, especially if they're even distributed across regions as well. Of course, if you want to take a screenshot of some of the PCI compliance requirements here, feel free. And I'd like to share with you just a standard reference architecture for a secure AWS environment where we take a look at a layered approach to security. This includes, of course, our Bastion host that provides secure access for our admins, and we can kind of track what the users are doing, firewalls to protect not only layer 4, but layer 7 traffic. And we leverage a multi-AZ synchronous replication of your database to improve resiliency. And if we take a look over to the right there, where you see management tools, this is kind of unique to Logicworks. We call it our cloud reliability platform, where we integrate directly with your AWS environment through APIs to provide monitoring, management, configuration, and to automate and enforce compliance of your infrastructure. So phase 2 is implementation. So when we think about things like, well, let's start out first. Let's start with the question first, actually. Do you need a web application firewall or network security group on my load balancer to meet the requirement? Well, in my opinion, you do need a web application firewall if you need to protect against layer 7 vulnerabilities, and you really should have one anyway because it's best practice. So when we think about things like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, which are some of the common exploits for malicious attackers for the web applications. Web application firewall is highly recommended. Again, you want to think about security in layers, right? You have your front door locked, you have all your security in your front door, you have each room in your house locked. Think about it in layers. Next one, can I bring my on-prem security tools to the cloud? Often the answer is yes, but you have to remember some of the usual security tools that operate very efficiently on-prem doesn't work the same in the cloud. So your security tooling in the cloud must scale up and scale down, and it must be economical, meaning that as it's scaling up to offer you all the protections and mitigating all the risks, it shouldn't be cost prohibitive for you to implement such a solution, right? You shouldn't be losing money if you're offering services in the cloud to generate revenue just by implementing these security solutions. There should be a good balance. Okay, so here's another one. How do I centralize egress filtering? And this is a major challenge for most customers. So how do I ensure that information leaving my network is monitored and restricted for traffic that I define? A typical approach is to build what we call like a central network environment. You can leverage a hub and spoke architecture to do this as well, or you can go a little bit higher and use more of an account level architecture. For those that are not familiar, think control tower, and that will kind of give you a sense of how the network account can be structured at an account level. Now, within the environment in this networking account, if you look to the right, all traffic will be routed through a virtual appliance or a cloud native service that would filter the traffic that's leaving out of your network. So if maybe like an agent got installed on your machines and is trying to communicate out to maybe a malicious attacker to pull information out, your egress filtering that's performed by that virtual appliance or cloud native solution will prevent that traffic. Next up is everyone's favorite, the documentation. So having a clear and concise documentation is truly essential to quality and process control. I know it can be a laborious endeavor, but it's truly worth it in my opinion. The documentation allows your security team and all your supporting staff to not only respond or identify the controls that are needed to support the environment, but they have a clear, detailed process for all the policies and procedures that's involved with creating the compliant environment for your customers and for your products and services. And next up, we have to enforce compliance. So how do we enforce compliance and how do we prevent drift? Now we take, a codified approach to infrastructure. Infrastructure as code is a powerful tool that not only allows developers to launch resources from a template, but it also applies software principles in how we manage cloud infrastructure. So this will increase the speed at which we can deploy new resources, reduces manual errors, and provides consistency across our environment by eliminating drift. Now, by codifying our infrastructure, we can further integrate our deployments with various security tooling. So think DevSecOps and create that immutable infrastructure. Pets, not cattle. And yes, next slide. So here is an example. So think about a really good service for this is AWS Config. It allows you to assess, audit, and evaluate the configurations of your AWS resources. It's truly a powerful tool that allows us to take advantage of that codified approach to compliance. So with it, when we help customers set up managed rules that come out of the box by from AWS, or we can set up custom rules to really fine tune it towards your compliance requirements. In addition to that, we can set alarms to notify if there's any configuration drift. So take, for example, you have a security group that was initially configured to only allow inbound traffic from, let's say, a private subnet. If there was a change to that security group made accidentally, or it could have been made by a malicious actor to allow all the inbound connections to come in from the internet. And that's a no-no. Maybe it's a database subnet or a database security group. We definitely don't allow all inbound traffic from the internet. What AWS config will allow you to do is to detect the drift from normal from your initial configuration, notify your security team, and if configured correctly, it can remediate that change, bring you back in alignment to your initial security posture. And phase 5 is to evolve. And here's where we take all their learnings and we truly have to ask these questions here. Have you documented all the risks in your environment? And do you have a path for addressing all the risks? Um, are you measuring progress? And is your company dedicated to this process? So one of the challenges with security is that while all the tooling is wonderful, it helps, it's great, what's missing is the human element. I'm sure you've heard it and when the first presenter was talking about it, the human element to kind of do a deep dive discovery of how that malicious actor enters the environment and how we can prevent those actions going forward. So there's a strong human element to security that, in my opinion, I don't think a tool can replace yet, but we can definitely use the tooling to, help us accelerate or security or security compliance. For numerics, this was a really great customer for us, and we really enjoyed working with them. So by partnering with Logicworks, numerics was able to accelerate their migration to AWS while maintaining PCI DSS compliance, which is no small feat, let me tell you. And this was all done within 6 months. And through the use of infrastructure as code, the deployments of new resources were automated, ensuring repeatability and accuracy. Now, what we leveraged for numerics was a hub and spoke model to provide central governance for their resources. Not only did we improve their security posture, we were also able to accelerate deployment of different SDLC environments. So they're able to spin up test environments, spin up maybe a dev environment, a QA environment. And if we needed to, it could mirror production environment, which a lot of companies would love to have in their current infrastructure. Finally, through the use of automation for numerics and the security expertise for managed services team, compliance is enforced 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And really, that is that is it. I kind of ran through it fairly quickly there. Uh, but thank you everyone for your time today. And if you have any other questions around, creating a compliant environment for your infrastructure, whether it's PCI, SOC, ISO 27001, or HIPAA, feel free to reach out. We offer a compliance assessment for customers and also a migration assessment. So if you're thinking about migrating to the cloud and you'd like it to be compliant, feel free to reach out. And if you're thinking of possibly redesigning what you currently have in your cloud infrastructure to be a bit more secure, we are the experts in this field.